Good afternoon, Alexander Nikolaevich. You are the director of the Regional Socio-Economic Development Fund, Treasury of the RAC Creator. As we have learned, the fund is accredited to the United Nations, and you as a person are accredited to the United Nations as a consultant. Yes, that is right. In 2017, the fund underwent registration and global accreditation within the United Nations. It is recognized and accredited. At the same time, I, as a person, for my work as a fund director, and until the fund was created, received the status of UN consultant. The question in this context is the following. What does the fund do? What is its role when it has received such accreditation, such status in the United Nations? It is time to talk about the work which is done by me and my kind, the fund staff and those who are not the fund staff but work with it, and they do a great sacred thing, which I would call the restoration of historical justice and the restoration of all assets, historical assets, deep historical assets, as well as current assets brought beyond the borders of our historical homeland, the assets of our nation that belong to our nation. In this context, I would like to say that we had to study very deeply the concept of what the world system itself is, what the financial system means in this world system, how it was historically formed, what principles it works on, how it works, how it is controlled, what are the laws in it, because if there weren't any laws in it, this system would not have been worked for a long time. It would have been fallen apart. There would be no foundations, no skeleton which the system would work on. Who are the financiers? What are the banks? What it meant by these assets in these banks? What are the centers of the issue? What is actually the money? What is the issue? What it is based on? What are the rules of the issue? The rules of money circulation and many other things. It is a multi-vector and complex issue. Does this mean that you had to dive into the depth of these things? Of course, this whole thing consists of very serious historical things. If we were to speak the current language, people who received education in the Soviet and post-Soviet periods began to perceive legends, historical information, fairy tales as something abstract, as something that does not correspond to the reality that exists today and the nation perceives as it is. This style of thinking is dedicated by the European civilization, and the style of thinking of Eastern and Asian civilization is completely different. Its foundations, its values are based on deeper historical things that currently exist in the daily lives of Asians. And there is a big difference in understanding what Asia is, what China is. Kitai is not the suitable word for China. Kitai is an old Russian word denoting the top of the pole, the rod. The country is called Chino, because in English it is written with ch and reads as ch, and the scientists who deal with it are called sinologists in Russian. So the word Chinese originated from the word sinotrop. No, I am more inclined to believe that the word Chinese came from the word sun. Historically, they were small. Nowadays, the Sinai are a little taller. If you look at their villages, at their residences, everything was built for people with a height of about half a meter. For such children in ancient Russia, they were called sons. Who is a younger brother. Kitai was the name of the top of the pole in Russia. The soul was measured by a pole, being when people were able to see the aura of man. When it was more manifested, people were able to see. In the past, ecology was not so much destroyed. Human consciousness was not sordid. People were more sensitive and they saw each other auras. If a highly conscious man, a highly developed being appeared, people called him Kitai, that is the top of the bar, a higher being, higher bar. Nikolai Levashov also spoke about it. I studied his work very carefully, which was based on facts and confirmed by artifacts. The number 6 is derived from 6, because in the 6th month of pregnancy the soul enters the fetus, when the spine is forming in the fetus. The soul is always connected to the spine with a bar. The word Kitai is only in Russian. No other language calls Chinese people this way. We think that when we say the word Kitai, we think that all Chinese people are Kitai and not Chinese. But the Chinese call themselves Sino. And in fact, it's right name. They have their reality, their philosophy and their worldview. The Western world has a completely different philosophy, different understanding of the world. And for us, the people who were brought up in the Western image, we have been taught hard in the Western style for the last 20 years. Honestly, not in the best way, through television, by all kinds of corrupt programs. At present, the media cannot be considered a credible source of information. I am deeply convinced that the media has become a means of a mass disinformation, because all media in our country are controlled by American funds, which means corporate law, censorship, and so on. These are the levers of media control: private property, private corporate law, specific institutions working in the field of politics and political science, the separation of one ethnic group, as they call it, from another, one country from another, and on this basis creating conflicts and disharmony. They do not build harmony, we see that clearly. They create conflicts between different states, artificial conflicts, bombs and mines. They are stored through linguistic programming in the media. It is no longer a secret that such technologies are used. Thank God all these things come to the surface through channels like REN TV or other channels. These technologies were developed and used as early as Ananerbe, during Hitler's government, when there were always Tibetan monks near him, and destroyed Germany after the war, suddenly received enormous technologies, which were used in German industry, engineering, military industry, which served in this global occupation of the world. The result is the creation of the European army, NATO, which for some reason turned against Russia in the person of the Soviet Union. Therefore, in short, studying the system, we are talking about Western, not about Asian, Eastern or Euro-Asian philosophy. We are talking about the whole, about general philosophy, because the system is based on the historical, mythical, millennial values that are based on it. How does the financial system actually work? It does not follow current political decisions. Politicians have always tended to take control of everything. Any politician who comes to a certain level of power, or a group that replaces a president or other leader, wants to concretize himself in this position forever. He wants to achieve absolute power over everything. It is usually built that way. Power, homeland. Vlast is a Russian word denoting lat, harmonize, harmony, in harmony. Keep the nation in lat, bliss and genera, to have this ability of harmony. Harmony and create harmony so that everyone lives in harmony together. Our officials are different. Yes, the official in another word, another phrase whose image is dominion. Dominion is always a downward movement, from top to bottom. They always want to force someone into something and raise a nation in the style of a Lord's servant, nation that gave them the right mandate for its activities. All conventions, international legal norms, common sense says that a nation is one that delegates the right to govern in order to create some form, some construction, or of universally organized coexistence in which everyone can exist and develop in harmony, according to some order, general human norms according to some correct, bright goals. But this function is forgotten. Those who have come to power today, not only in our country but also over the world, have not understood that the power is not domination and have placed the nation in the role of servants. They filled their bellies stubbornly, they stole everything from their master, at first quietly, hiddenly, then openly, rudely, and now they are only interested in robbery. The word official originated from the word office. The official changed from a servant of the nation to an enemy of the nation. This is how it is all over the world. This is how it works everywhere. In all institutions where there are people who receive payment from man, from the nation, and are employed to serve man and nation, to help men to create harmony. In this present they sit in their places and behave like rats, like predators that bite their master instead of helping and serving him. There is one goal: give money, self-enrichment, and the criminal self-enrichment. I remember in my childhood, in the Soviet Union, it was a shame to borrow money from a neighbor. Such situations did not exist at all. I remember maybe 2 or 3 situations where parents borrowed money. They were very ashamed of it. But borrowing money was luck. It was a pleasure to help when someone needed help. It was made the mood of my parents better. They always helped the beggars, but when they needed help, when they had to ask for help, it was uncomfortable for them. This was proper moral, spiritual education, bright education. Nowadays, everything is reversed. These Western values, which were created especially for us, turned everything on top of their heads, distorted human consciousness. People lost the notion that man is invaluable. Man cannot be given any prize. Man is the Son of God in the world. This must be understood. We have forgotten what God is. All the current temples and churches that used to be schools for children where they were taught by wise people, are now inhabited by people who walk in gold clothes, to whom people bring money, who are all politicized. I do not want to talk about it further. Let the nation form its opinion on this matter. Are you saying that your fund will change all this? I want to say the following. Our goal is, my job is, and fortunately there are individuals who have the same views. So our view is that everything has to be turned back from head to toe. This is simply necessary. Otherwise, the existence of the human race will no longer make sense. Everything can go so far that everything will be destroyed again. That is how I understand it. Everything will be destroyed by God's power, because man will stop developing, man will degrade. Based on this view, based on the understanding that we have our family, we have our descendants, as we grow up and begin to understand the context, to analyze the information, that when we consider ourselves strong, it is our duty to restore justice, to correct the direction of development of ourselves and our future generations into a bright and spiritual future. Not in the direction of darkness and self-destruction. I think this is correct. Alexander Nikolaevich, the fund is purposefully trying to regain national wealth since 2015. Tell me, please, what has been achieved to date? Do you have any visible success? What are your problems? The fund, even before its establishment, the team that founded this fund, the people who worked on it, did a huge amount of work. A huge amount of work has been done in the study of the conceptual level of management, the transnational level of management, and many other things. I had the opportunity to follow the work of Situation and Analytical Center of Prime Minister Putin for more than two years. I can say with certainty that the Illuminati worked in this center. This Illuminati represented or worked in the Vatican service of Opus Dei. And many serious secrets came to surface there. Serious secrets the nation had no idea about. In order to be able to answer your question, I need to explain in a few words how the system works. The system consists of many centers. The largest and most powerful center of this parasitic system, which is the head of this system, is Shambhala. It's Tibet. This is the center that stands above all the other centers of the world, the guild management system. Below Tibet, there are other centers involved in the UN system, the Vatican, structures and institutions, different statutes. For example, the Vatican has the statutes of the state, even though it is a religious center. All religions in the world are related to the Vatican and are governed by the Vatican. It does not matter if it is Islam or Buddhism or other religions. In any case, the leadership leads to the Pope of Rome. What is religion? As Sergei Strizhak describes it very clearly in his films Game of Gods by decomposing the world's religion into letters according to the Russian bukvica, Re. Reconstruction, Ligi. Lig are goals, Ya, I. I, as a person, if you are a son of God, it means the reconstruction of your being, your person as a son of a God, the path of law for the Creator and for yourself. Road reconstruction. If a direct path to God exists, any change is wrong. Today's religions deal with the distortion of this path, each in its own way. I was in the Middle East recently talking to Sufi wise men. I liked the very important Sufi statement when there was a dispute with radical young Islamists who started shouting the name of Allah, saying that he was the only one and that everything else needed to be cut out. His older kind of faith, who stood higher in Sufism and who the young Islamists respected much, said, "Hold on, what are you saying? Religion is just a way to faith." He said that very correctly. Once a person has attained faith, the path is no longer necessary. He's been through it. Faith is just understanding the Russian word viera, knows Ra, knows what Ra is. Ra built a suffix in our place as an extension, but Ra is the main root of the Russian language. Therefore, in our country, all bright and festive things always contain the word Ra. Because when we take bukvica, the Russian language is composed of bukvica. Bukvica is composed of pictures. Consonant and vowel are always used. These two pictures create a more complex picture, and depending on their distribution, we get the given word. Then, when we want to unify the usual initial words into a more complex picture, we get an abbreviation. The word faith is exactly the abbreviation of the image viera, to know Ra. What does Ra mean? R means speech, say speaking. A means us, the God on the earth. Together, Ra means the language of the God. Whatever word, light and word are native Breton, inseparable from one another. I was born in the USSR, and I hadn't thought about these things before. But as I began to deal with the secrets of verse and their deep meaning, I began to understand what the USSR abbreviation actually means. It is a very bright abbreviation of a very serious words. 3S means three suns, three lights. In Russia, there are very historically three suns: Jarilo, rain god, Horus, and the final R means their speech. Together, it means the speech of three sun brothers. And in the understanding of our Russian Vedic culture, Yarilo, rain god, and Horus mean the center of Asgard, the heavenly. You see, all of these ancient things, the Vedas were, over the time, destroyed by foreign religions. There was one very serious comrade among us. Unfortunately, he left us recently, Sergei Danilov. He described very clearly all these things that I am talking about now. In my opinion, we have to rely on them if we want to change some serious things. Let's look at the following. The fund has basic goals and tasks in its name. Socio-economic development of regions, not just some center, but all regions as a whole. Social means society. If we do not understand what society, man, family, gender, breed and nation are, then how do we want to develop society? Probably everything must be based on the knowledge of ancestors and not on modern wrongs, which are invented by wrongs sitting in the offices and institutions of the Illuminati. These were hazards invent new words, but they can't explain the scientific word of the natural processes. They can't explain any of them. There are infinite examples. They always cover everything with some incomprehensible word. We ask about some process. Why is it this way? The answer is some fictional word. Why is it like that? And therefore the answer is vague. And as a man being afraid of not knowing, accepts this explanation and begins to repeat it, confirming this beautiful nonsense. And so new and new waves of this ignorance are brought into society, among the population. Unfortunately, they have always succeeded in these manipulations. Fortunately, people are changing, energy is changing, the situation is changing, information flows are changing, the media is changing, the media has gone to a completely different level, phones have appeared, WhatsApp has appeared, video cameras, people are recording everything, they are writing, exchanging information about UFOs, about incredible nature phenomena, about exorcism. Everything is immediately recorded on video and it is immediately appears on the network. And people are beginning to understand that not everything is exact as they taught us in the school. They tied us to this material matrix that everything needs to be captured, felt, seen, heard, and everything about this is supposedly on the level of imagination and fiction. In this way, people's consciousness has changed over time. And therefore, in order to achieve the socio-economic development of the regions, we must understand what society actually means, what it is, how we should approach it. In Soviet times, the so-called 13th department of the KGB, USSR, which dealt with all occult matters, occult things, meant some ancient knowledge. They studied all of our shamans, all these ancient sites that were preserved, all the national affairs in this direction. All these things have been studied. The 13th department was actually the Institute of Sociology, Institute of Society. Regarding economic development, it is not possible to deal with economics if we do not understand what the word economy means. Our officials who sit in our ministers and other cabinets and officials should realize what the economy is, what finances are. They're important. Not just say finances and continue to read some lines and then let others repeat everything. You need to know what the money is. The nation thinks that the money in some piece of paper that lies in a pocket or on a card. If only the nation thought so, the nation is far more rational, but those who sit in our Ministry of Finance think the same. I recently had an interview with one of the chief auditors of the Ministry of Finance. It was a closed circle conversations where there were some generals aware of all this wrong doing and knowing that they are fooling us. I could not stand it, and I openly called on them to stop talking about Russian ministry, but let them tell the truth as it really is. And I also told them we knew the truth. The auditor proved that to be a normal person, he had age and dignity, and said, Alexander Nikolaevich, you are absolutely right. Currently, the only task of the ministry is to translate American instructions into Russian. We are talking about the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation. The ministry is only concerned.
Это в Российской Федерации. Да, в Российской Федерации. Вся проблема, вся сложность.
Its only problem is to avoid any translation errors and to correct the instructions given by Washington. I would like to emphasize that the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation existed or exists.
России не было.
When we registered the fund in 2013, firstly we established it, then we received the certain powers of attorney from the Soviet Union. Certainly tasks and goals were set in front of the fund. In 2015, we opened various accounts for the fund and transferred certain amounts of money to them. I studied and analyzed the laws of the Russian Federation. I came to the tax inspection. I presented them with all the documents on the establishment of the fund's accounts stipulated by law. After the money was transferred to these accounts, we submitted all statements and information in time. This happened in the spring of 2015. In my opinion, from the point of view of the financier and the economist and the banker, I felt that there was a finance minister. There were his deputies who provided the president or prime minister with some information, some assessments, inflation rates, information on the economic situation and so on. I thought that everything was being monitored and studied. I was shocked to learn that in the spring that the declared turnover on the accounts according to the statement, money in the amount of more than 10 billion euros. Which is a lot of money in the Saratov region, and that tax inspection number 8 of the city of Saratov did not sit to the Central Federal Tax Office. At the end of the year, I learned from the Inside Tax Inspection, we have people there who told me that nothing like this had been done. No one went to the headquarters. No business information was provided. So the tax inspection number 8 of the cities of Saratov registered a lot of businesses and organizations throughout the year, pretending to be doing some business, collecting some taxes, some tax returns, and there was no connection to the Central Federal Tax Inspection database in Moscow. That means they do what they want in Saratov, and at the end of the year they'll probably pass on some fictional financial statements, evidences, and it is accepted in the Russian Federation by some fabrication. And some officials claim corruption in the engine of the is the engine of the progress. I was very surprised when I heard about this. This financial statement, accompanied by some briefcases, is always harmoniously entered into the central database at the end of the year. If anything like that even exists, I personally checked these things and was shocked. I have spoken to many directors of various secret services about this. They said that could not be true. I will tell them to check it out. I personally checked this and made a scandal with the deputy director of this tax inspection. He was a boy who had no idea what he was talking about. He was appointed to this position by his father, who was the director of another inspection on one side of the village. He placed his son on the other side of the village. He taught him how to work. When I went to his office and asked him why there was no information about the fund, which had such a large amount of money in the balance sheet, it affects the consolidated balance sheet of the Russian Federation. The fund is Russian. The declarations are submitted to the Ministry of Finance. In accordance with all standards and international standards, this information relates to the consolidated balance sheet of the Russian Federation. Why is it not done yet? He replied that he was not obliged to answer. Only when I forced to tell him something serious about the topic, then he apologized to me and promised to pass all the information to the center. That means they are hiding it. Of course, they are hiding it, and I'm sure it's not just tax inspection number 8. Such practices are everywhere. The real situation in business, the real situation in the economy in Russia is not monitored in any way. Of course, there raises another question. Do institutions such as the central bank, the liberal bloc, the ASV, and others help you in your work? Organizations associated with finance and economics. I will tell you very seriously that they would have helped us a lot if they had not thrown locks at our feet. They prevent us from the ground up. The problem is that the fund is not a commercial organization. We are not interested in profit. It is not our goal. There are no shares in the fund. There is no inheritance by my children or family members. It is the right national work. We are dealing with the right goals. For that, we have also united into a fund. We are interested in the social economic development of our country's region and friendly countries, which also strengthens our country. As a result, we have not found understanding. We have found complete opposition to our work, mainly by the liberal bloc, mainly by the central bank. We need to think about what the central bank really is. We work like this. When something doesn't work, when there is no logic something, it is necessary to dig deeper, to find out who is responsible. I was very surprised when I found out that according to the documents, the Russian Federation was established in 1993. But the central bank of the Russian Federation was registered and established in 1990. I can substantiate everything I tell you with documents. This means that the Russian Federation did not yet exist, but the central bank was already working. The Central Bank of the Russian Federation, the Act of 1990 and the Central Bank of the Russian Federation appeared. This is not coincidence, this is absurd. The tax office was registered in 2003. Yes, until then we did not pay any taxes to the state. I do not know what it is, what if it is paying anything at all. It is clear to us today that the central bank was indeed registered in 1990, but the central bank of the RSFSR, where all assets belong to the nation, still belongs to the nation. No one has ever changed it, and only the sovereign Soviet of the RSFSR is authorized to administer these assets. I recently visited parliamentarian Fyodorov at State Duma, where very interesting documents appeared at my request, stating that there were no acts amending the Yeltsin Declaration by which Yeltsin declared the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation and its succession to the law of RSFSR, which moved on to the Russian Federation. There are no legal documents on the change of the name of the RSFSR to the Russian Federation and the succession of the RSFSR to the Russian Federation. This was confirmed by the Ministry of Justice of the Russian Federation. Then that means no one gave anything to anyone. So no one gave anything to anyone. Yeltsin arrived, declared the Russian Federation, a group of American Yeltsin burners supported the statement, and the media began to talk to the nation about the Russian Federation. That is all, and this is how it is with us. There is no succession to the law. Look at the pension fund, look at any other fund. You will encounter the same situation. As the economist, financier and person who understands the law a bit, I see that all our official certificates show the management companies that send all the money abroad. All the money goes away through foreign payment systems, so we all pay the taxes that go abroad. To those centers where the war in the Ukraine is financed, those centers that give Ukraine war bonds, securities that allow Ukraine to finance the war against us. And when I see all this, I'm convinced that someone is very sophisticated, or rather bluntly and openly liquidates. After all, with our own hands. Here we see Brzezinski, who speaks everything openly. He said honestly, even though he is now out of his reality, he openly said that he wants to destroy Russia itself with Russia's hands. And I have to deal with this because we have taken on the responsibility of dealing with the social economic development of the regions of Russia. We must understand and be aware of these facts that prevent us from carrying out this social economic development. To date, it is clear that the Central Bank of Russian Federation is a structure that has never inherited the rights and obligations of Central Bank of RSFSR. Let's say it's a management company. The Russian Federation is not registered. There is only a Central Bank law of 1990, but the Central Bank itself does not exist in the form as it states. The origin of the Central Bank is unknown, and our Central Bank is not registered in Russia. Registration of the Russian Federation does not exist. There is no listing from the register of the state administration bodies of the Russian Federation. There is no data on the central bank that would confirm that the central bank is registered in the Russian Federation. It is clear from this register that the central bank is Central Bank RSFSR, established in 1990, but Central Bank of the Russian Federation does not exist in this register. Furthermore, some colleagues from the secret services who do not have to be named in love, the English confirmed that England had recently informed that no central bank was registered there. Then, when our patriots revealed information about what our central bank really is, the black brokers who caused this situation and founded this central bank were relieved of responsibility for this mess that they did not cause this. We have to talk there ourselves. We have Nabulina there sitting in the central bank. We have to make a deal with her. Kissinger immediately distanced himself from her. The Kissinger who founded the Commission 300, the Kissinger who founded this crazy system of human capitalization.
Это как раз он подчеркнул, каких людей у нас.
He covered such people as Chubais, Gref, Commission 300 stood behind them, and other one was there.
Значит, Грефа и этого самого Греф, Чубайс и третий, сейчас я вспомню, какой человек, но Набиулин,
I must remember Kudrin. They immediately distanced themselves from Nabulina. Kudrin is the leader of the Liberal Bloc and the main spokesman for the Commission 300 and the USA, communicating with the Patriotic Bloc of Russia.
Значит, получается, что англичане открестились, американцы тоже официально открестились, и мы получили какую-то некую...
Did the English and Americans distance themselves from the establishment of our central bank?
Да. Вообще, что он
Yes, they have generally distanced themselves from having our central bank registered with them. That it is registered in these countries. We had some serious insider shadow information from a very serious sources that this bank was registered in America under US law as a branch of the FRS. But they officially distanced themselves, saying it did not register as a structure and did not know what the structure was. But they stole in bulk for more than 20 years. They stole and exported everything they could. The country's finances and resources, dollars mainly, because we have no money. Rubles are not real money. I will explain why rubles are not money. The central bank does not exist. There is a consulting company, Central Bank Russian Federation, some criminal structure that is not registered anywhere, that does not listen to anyone here, that pushes funds for circulation in Russia. These funds are not accepted by anyone in the world. Their conversion takes place only through the Soviet ruble, which can be verified on the central bank's website. The Soviet ruble has code 810. They have not yet abolished it because they cannot even abolish it. Although under the 2004 law, this ruble was to be taken out of turnover and liquidated. It was to be replaced by currency code 640. But they cannot do so because all conversion processes with the outside world would be interrupted. When I started working with the UN, I began to find that there was no Russian Federation in the system. Is there no Russian Federation in the United Nations? It doesn't exist anywhere at all. There is some right. Otherwise, everything in the world would fall apart if UN did not comply with the legal norms. There was a war that ended in 1945. Borders were agreed based on the results of the World War II. States were established that were confirmed in the international space. Rules were agreed on how new countries and states in various territories would be declared, and so on. Everything had been registered. These conventions have not been repealed by anyone. They are still valid through the system. The system is composed of national legislation, interstate open and secret treaties, historical treaties and international conventions based on international organizations. Today, the UN is the largest international organization in the world. Almost all the countries in the world are members. Some states have passed registration at the UN, some states have not. This is how this system works. The Secretary General, Mr. Gi Moon, has made it very clear during the Ukrainian conflict that he does not understand what the international conflict is about. Although I do not like the word international because there is only one nation on earth, our family of heaven. There are many nationalities, there are only one nation. The word international has a deeper meaning than just international. Therefore, we will continue to use the word national and international so that we can understand each other and so that the viewer understand me. So Mr. Gi Moon made it clear that there is no national conflict, there are only internal conflicts. Thus, the law is created, including international law. Ukraine is an internal conflict within the USSR. With how they share with themselves to Russia, to some republics, is their internal affairs. We have nothing to do with it. There is sovereign thing, but USSR is sovereign. The sovereign Russian Federation does not exist and never existed. The Russian Federation is a criminal syndicate created by losing the Cold War, where the Anglo-Saxons, along with a gang of Rothschilds, established their order in this territory, installed their bandits, shared this territory, created ethnic conflicts through the media and American funds. As a result, millions of people have been killed, hundreds of thousands for sure, and I don't know even now how many. Millions of people have died and been destroyed. These are real terrorists. They shared everything and let the nation be robbed, not giving the nation the right it deserves its occupation. Member of Parliament Fyodorov says it right. This is really an occupation. There is no need to confuse the terms here. As the constitution of the Russian Federation was confirmed in 93, nothing has been confirmed either. In 93 there was a project, the draft constitution of the Russian Federation. Secondly, political scientists made a smart ballot to which voting for individual deputies, people also voted for the draft constitution. No one accepted the constitution. They violated all principles and committed the falsification of elections and referendums on the proclamation of the constitution of the Russian Federation, with all the ensuing consequences.
Выборов референдума, значит, провозглашения Конституции Российской Федерации. Со всеми вытекающими последствиями, то есть
that is, with all illegal practices over many years, we can call it the world business without us. There is everything without us, without the nation for sure. The world business is creating against the nation. Enterprising people are forgotten, but without us, they have all become businessmen, especially in terms of power and many secret services. They have made us a business out of everything. If we look closely at it, all the state authorities, the state power will understand that we will live in one huge lie, a very big lie. So far, we operate in the USSR with a valid USSR constitution, with a valid USSR civil and criminal code, with valid rights and obligations to USSR citizens. The USSR is a state, it is not just some union of republics. In 1977, a common constitution was reaffirmed that speaks of a unitary state, not of a Russian union with the federal republics, not as it is sung in the anthem. The union of indestructible free republics have become a great Russian. We are talking about a state where someone came, occupied, divided, deceived with the help of media and magic, wrapped up all the time they took, stole our property, tried and imprisoned under incomprehensible laws. The real criminals in this experiment of the Russian Federation and other republics are protecting pedophilia. They have abolished adultery completely. They have started to promote some gender equality. God knows what else. Basically, these are anti-moral things.
Да, и, значит, начали пропагандировать, бог весть что.
Гендерное равенство.
Бог весть что. Не бог весть, вернее, это антинравственные вообще позиции. Поэтому,
therefore, I want to say the following. Why do they still think we are fools? Because it is very advantageous for the enemy to deceive the owner of the fundamental money in the global financial system. We know such a system concept, money owner. The system works on the principles where the money owner is the system. In the system must have a share of each project in the system of 95% at least. The system does not work otherwise. It will not allow a smaller share. It doesn't matter if it's a financial project, a construction project, a big project, programs, whatever. The owner of the money in the system must have at least 95%, period. The system is obliged to ensure all things. This is how the world financial system works, and it turns out that the gold was mined industrially only in Russia. The Soviet Union and Tsarist Russia, where it was all stored, because here gold was prepared and used to establish the League of Nations. Our gold was used as a financial platform of the UN and its entire financial system. All historical gold, when we then set out on the path of the sacred things and were initiated into the mysteries. When we began to study these things, we found that historical sacred gold also has its roots in Russia. Not in Russia, but in Ra Seya. Ra shines. As it has always been said, the shine of Ra. Again, we meet Ra in this name. So we have founded some defenders of this system who protected certain system assets under this signature and live a separate life dedicated to this sacred duty, say that there is a 1,000-year contract on these assets. There are 300 years contracts. There are other contracts with different durations. And when we look at the different periods of validity of these treaties from year to year, they again only divide the asset of Russian multinational nation, the ancient Russia. Everyone shares these assets, no matter how they are called, Sino, Chinese, everyone shares our assets. So it is extremely advantageous to keep the owner of money in the system unconscious and not to allow the USSR to be renewed. Even if the USSR exists, it does not need to be renewed, just to need to realize de jure and de pravo. De jure is a special concept, but de pravo exists 100%. I tell you this, it is disadvantageous for them to renew SSSR with this name. Parasites always search for a moment to deceive the owner, the nation. And how? Imagine there is a 100 years trust contract. What was the RSFSR? The RSFSR has always been Terra of Russia, and they made the RF Terra Russia. And you don't understand if it's a Rasi Bank or a Central Bank of Russian Federation. So they mixed it up somehow, and even they can't clearly figure it out, and they don't know how to explain it to the nation. What is the central bank? They say to the nation, read the law, but they do not read it themselves. I'm sure the Nabulina herself does not yet know this law, or does not need to know it, because they live by completely different principles. But then how should the nation know it? And based on this, even the 1,000 years trust, as far as the Russia is concerned, it remains as it was. The RSFSR is part of the USSR, which it organized as a central part, so it remains Russia. But now also together with the fraternal nations united and formed a state, a counterpoint is the finance of Western lawlessness and corruption. And corruption always carries degradation with it, and particularly leads to self-destruction. So we are not breaking the 1,000-year trust, and they know very well that in 1991 these parasites actually tried to destroy the Soviet Union because they initially organized it as the Zionist movement. But later the nation in battle and Stalin offset balanced the situation and made this country national. And they wrote the best constitution of all in the world to this day. The law, the set of laws, the constitution, which is actually the wrong word. All states that have a constitution are colonies. Those who are at the forefront of world governance, such as England, a kingdom, whereas if the Queen had a passive role, then Spain and so on. They do not have a constitutions. Although they are considered constitutional monarchies, they do not have a constitution. You will not find constitution anywhere in there. They have a completely different set of laws when it comes to governance. They are called various different names, but it is not constitution. Constitution is something like a software product that was written for the colonies. That is allowed. Yes, it is practically the same thing, only in different points. If you compare the constitutions of different states, you will see the same thing in there, only in different places. But the meaning is the same. About them stands international law and international agreement. On the basis of these colonies, a common system was formed, a crooked world government that was planned to be built at the expense of the wealth and gold of the Soviet nation. As Brzezinski said, at our expense and against us, and with our effort, they will be destroying us, by overturning everything and deceiving everyone. Therefore, I would not even say that mass media are not the fourth power, but that they are actually stand above all the governments, prime ministers, president. That media are those who make up public opinion. They can hurt and destroy someone, honest in many ways, and at the same time they can also praise fraudsters and clean them of guilt. This is how media can work, they also keep on working that way. And based on this, I've said that because the adversary wants it to be in the line with the bandit treaty signed in the Russian Federation immediately after colonization, to exploit our multi-ethnic Russian nation, as if due to the loss in the Cold War, according to my information received on December 31st, 2017, the Russian Federation treaty expired, so it hasn't actually existed since. And if you take the British Handbook of Legal Commercial Organizations, I think it's called UP, then you will clearly find everything about the company called Russian Federation with the director Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev.
Вы четко найдете ОАО компании Российской Федерации с руководителем почему-то Медведевым Дмитрием Анатольевичем.
There is no president in there. There you will find companies OO MVD России, OOO FSB России, OOO FNS России, and all of that is the corporate law. It is all corporate assets. Therefore, if there is any private property, there must be also private owners.
Участники, владельцы всего этого хозяйства, правильно?
This means that these companies then, according to the statutes, make a profit.
Конечно.
Of course, they are set up that way. At present, all courts are paid, all court services are paid, and today it doesn't even seem like a joke or a saying to me, but it's already absolutely clear as a law. How much they judge, they also bring it. And that is how such a court will then look alike. Yes, someone is always about that court. In our country, it is the Russian Federation. I can already say it clearly today, especially with regards to financial affairs and banks. This is all managed by comrade Simonovsky. He's a curator of the courts and judges who depend entirely on the comrade's phone call. Is this a former deputy director of the central bank? Yes, he is a former deputy director of the central bank who worked on the US Secret Service, constantly supplying them with specific information. I have such an information about him, but thank God they already quietly removed him from there as he was overdoing it with passing on this information. He did more than was necessary. So, on one hand, the FSB covers residents in our country, those who work in Russia, those who are registered and work with Russia and also have their identification numbers. They are also on the non-residents' websites and being put into the tax registers. This is how CDB Bank is registered in our country. And on the other hand, all the information comes from the central bank directly, via official channels. Well, they thought it was registered in America and it was an American company, and then it turned out to be, it wasn't American. I understand. Alexander Nikolaevich, you spoke about the USSR issue, and so I am asking now, will we be renewing it or how will it be? Yeah, in order for our country and our nation to be able to develop further at all, to be able to develop and live in general, in space, in the system, it is necessary to give them a legal form. But there are no such a form yet, or actually there is, but we keep floating on some kind of boards and someone forgot about the legal form, and we are constantly drawing on these boards. There was a referendum, and a big empty ship keeps on floating. At the same time, yes, we don't even perceive it or understand it. In 1991, there was a referendum in which the owner, the nation, decided to preserve the USSR in all its republics. That's a fact. And this fact was recognized by the whole world. Thank goodness the world recognized two such facts. These are the assembly from 1613 and the referendum in 1991. All other polls, anyone who knows the internet and even any small child knows that on Keselna Street in the FSB building there is a special computer installed by the English that is conducting elections, and the button regarding 3 options. This is a game what they prepared way before is because pressed in London. Which option they will give to the nation? Who has got what percentage and who wins the election? This program is such a big and ridiculous deception in the election. When I know exactly the people in my hometown, and when 10% came to vote there, media wrote that the attendance was 90%. What elections are we talking about? What is it about? Nobody votes for anyone, nobody believes anything, and this shows has stopped working. What happened in 1991 was a real referendum, and the nation really came together, and the parasites didn't know what to do, and so they complied such a crooked bulletin for the USSR in its new form. What new form? in a renewed form. Yes, in a renewed form. And what is this? Renewed form. What kind of legal term is that? Who reinvented it and what did they mean by that? And whatever bulletin they publish, they also build on it. For the USSR, in a renewed form, and what this referendum brought, Parasite had taken advantage of the fact that it had once bombed the Russian Empire, which effectively controlled the Fed. And I already know what this exactly, and created the Zionist state, the Soviet Union, which later grew into a nation-state that grew very rapidly after Stalin's victory in 1945. No other state had developed so rapidly, which was due to Stalin and the enthusiasm of our already post-war nation, our fathers and mothers, grandfathers and old grandmothers. So what did they actually do? They say, you know, these banks are in their territory, so they are kept in their accounts, and there are also the warehouses there, where the assets lie. This doesn't belong to the USSR, this belongs to the Romanovs. And I ask, what Romanovs? Well, that's how they fool. And this doesn't belong to Romanovs, it belongs to the group of old believers, Staroverci, and this belongs to the Alexander II, and that belongs to somebody else again. This is how they divided it all. They are explaining to everyone that the bankers are actually doing their job, but they are not giving anything to anyone, but they are using those assets themselves, creating their businesses, shifting everything from one balance sheet to another, and they're enriching themselves, creating and raising these fanatics, in quotes called elites, who pile up the sums in their accounts and live in a world of these numbers. These are parasites. Money as a tool was created for the development of mankind and not for anyone to pile up huge sums in their accounts and then wave with them as I am the strongest. No, these are the sick people without reason. These people need to be kept out of the society. Realistically, keep them out and try to treat them with all the possible, or maybe try to do something different with them. So that's what they are dealing with. And now they are trying to do the same. And why? Because in 1991 referendum there are no Romanovs, no group of old believers, well, they actually do not exist, but they are just representatives of the nation, protectors. Inside of the system they are called protectors, holders and administrators, but not the owners of money. The owner of money, historical assets, as it has always been in our country, in Russia and under international law, has always been the nation. And when the nation decided in 1991, it made it clear by its vote that it wanted the Soviet Union to remain. So from that moment on, the United became 100% legal. It became a national grouping. The Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics state has become legal, and the state has the right, the leadership of the state as a sovereign, has the right to demand the historical assets of Russians, of the Russian nation for the whole period of its time. The whole period, that's the whole system. And when we used to meet and experimented a lot, we experienced encounters with the dragons. We know what the order system is. We know what the colors of the aristocracy mean. We know what the financial order system is. We know what the various secret committees are. Starting with the Committee of 3, the Committee of 5, the Committee of 13, and the 12 committees in general, which are present all over the world where democracy is, the Rothschild system, etc. So we know this whole behind-the-scenes scheme, so-called the pyramid of unstructured governments, violence, and the development of genocide of human society. We know that all. And lately we have unfortunately only been seeing these financial flows of these fools, which are used to finance the genocide of nations. I read the Cyrus Anti-Terror Civil Service statement which was sent to the United Nations, where it was discussed and said, find the United States guilty of crimes against humanity and genocide of the nations of the world. And it included a clear historical list of the specific circumstances of these crimes since the foundation of the United States. Year after year, both in Russian and English languages. Just imagine that it has not been one single year since the foundation of the United States that the United States did not commit these crimes in the whole world. That's a fact that cannot be questioned. And while the United States were destroying the United Nations founder, the Soviet Union, they were pushing their American structures into the United Nations exclusive bodies at the possible moment. They put the Fed in there, and Federal Economic Department of the Fed and many others. And so far they are all subjected to them. But the agreement is ready. The system is already in place. They didn't create it, but we did. We invented this whole system, and it was created for our money, the money of the Soviet nation that they threw away.
За наши деньги, за деньги советского народа, которые кинули.
And then they took over it. Yes, I will tell the history briefly. In 1945, after the victory in the Great Patriotic War, when the victorious states came together, when they agreed the borders, assets, etc., and like the great Soviet nation and its leader, Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, they decided to form the United Nations. The United Nations. And the United Nations was meant to be the center of the regulation and law enforcement in the world, in which all nations were involved. They founded the League of Nations, which is a financial platform, and the foundation of the United Nations are also the nations. It is taking into account the interests of the nations.
Что ООН, это тоже основано на нациях, на соблюдении интересов наций. То есть было предложено.
The Stalinists suggested that since the Soviet nation was the winner, it was the strongest state at the time, so why wouldn't the Soviet Union set aside gold reserves for everyone, for all other states, and we will give guarantees. This is how the Western states approached it, and we will also give you a financier who knows how to do it. He will be the best one, and you will pay for it. Yes, the one who will be responsible for this, and by which we mean all the states. You set aside 3,500 tons of gold to create the United Nations. Raidam will receive this gold. He will be the main financier who will start financing everything in the economy and the whole financial development of the UN, and we guarantee that the Raidam will return the deposit from the United Nations in 50 years. You will have 3,500 tons of gold back, plus you will also receive interest, which should have been a considerable amount. I do not remember exactly now, but it should have been several $100 billion. And that was the Soviet nation was supposed to get back. The interest rates varied. For that, and in the end, very decent money. Imagine what 1 billion meant in 1991. What kind of sum is it? And then the deadline for repaying these deposits and assets came. It was in 1995. The comrades started thinking, because once they steal something, they don't return anything back, and they started thinking how to deal with it. Firstly, what to do with the multinational Russian nation that made the Soviet Union so strong. So the ideology of capital must be promoted over the importance of a man, not man over the means or of production and over capital. They really dealt with such folly. So they organized a betrayal of the Soviet Union. In various ways, using CIA agents, MI8 and MI6 and various special services. They downgraded and dismantled the country's top political leadership, simply subverting the country's top political leadership. Many of them received yellow certificates because many things were unclear, so just in case. And Comrade Gorbachev came to power. This was completely illegal because neither the constitution of USSR nor any legal act enacts the function of the president in the state. This just isn't there. Simply put, this feature was somehow self-proclaimed, and this president is just interposed resident. I just need to see it in Russian, and I know what it means. That an interposed spy. He started to deal with rebuilding, resetting and reworking, and he was preparing the country for its destruction. He simply had to hand it over. For whose money? It was a part of the interest they were supposed to pay back. And I am not even talking about the deposit of 3,500 tons of gold. I'm only talking about the part of the percentage that they were requested to pay back. 30 pieces of silver. Yes, 30 pieces of silver, for which they bought him, and all the other money that was set aside by the Americans, which was used for the disintegration, betrayal and destruction of the Soviet Union. Those were just breadcrumbs compared to what they stole from us. All sorts of resources, just how much scrap metal they exported, for example, and from then it went as it was normal. The traitors of the state arrived and began to disintegrate, steal and sell the country to the left and to the right, and so on. That's how it all turned out. Those were terrible times. I remember them. I learned about it at school. It did happen. And who will be restoring this? We have to return the USSR. If we do not return the USSR in its proper legal aspect, which exists today, and if we do not do so on the basis of the legal platform, then we will not give back to our nation, and the nation cannot be deceived, and it should not be deceived. We will not return the nation its assets, and the assets, the RA fund, and our other collaborators have done a colossal job, and the assets are being returned to our entire nation, virtually all of them. They already are. They are practically returned. Our task is simply to organize the state bank correctly, and then in the bank it is necessary to quickly open the accounts for the citizens of the USSR on the basis of current IT technologies and pay them the compensation for being robbed during Soviet times, monetary compensations. If it is not a secret, is that the compensation going to be big? It will be sufficient, believe me. I can't tell you what exactly in numbers now, but it will be very dignified. And it's not just words. It really is like that. In addition, the money that will be in the central bank will be secured and covered by M0 assets, direct collateral, covered directly by gold. Because any money in the world which is considered as freely transferable money is just paper, a line in a bank. It is a right, and it does not matter from which emission center they come or how they are marked, euro or dollar. And a right to what? To compensation for the equivalent of your work activities. And what is this equivalent? What is this right given for? It's bank gold, as it was, and so it remained. And no system institution that emits money can issue currency in the legal space or the system without its coverage by this asset. And all this myth that the President of the United States once wrote that uncovered dollars can be printed are just fairy tales. The dollar was printed on the basis of assets, but they took those assets illegally. That is, by fraud, not fulfilling their obligations to the protectors of the assets of the world financial system, including Asians, dragon clans, white dragon society, etc. I want to tell you the following. I know some people from these families. I communicate with the protectors directly. Everything is clearly set, not even a penny. None of Rothschilds or Rockefellers are those comrades who have taken over our Fed and who are in charge. Our Fed. The Fed is a private structure, and the shareholders of the Fed are the legal elite of nations funded by Nicholas II. 88% share, 97% share. 88% is an incorrect information. It is 97%. The Fed shares belong to the Russian nation, in the name of the Romanovs and some other protectors. You understand what this is about?
В лице там Романовых и других некоторых хранителей. Понимаете, в чем дело?
but they are run by a gang. And this gang took the assets for emitting purposes because the energies don't work otherwise. There is nothing you can do about the assets themselves. And there are also world financial system supervisory authorities and the Fed. That is just a small breadcrumbs compared to them. So they didn't pay the protectors a single penny for asset management, not a cent. So these seem to be some kind of ideologies of these beings. That's how I'm going to call them, of these families. They only work on a way and not the other. They are not capable of doing that. They are incompetent. Everything they took from the system, and the system was common and planned as self-sufficient, self-evolving. That is Russian consciousness. It built such a system. And when these, I call them Greek Pindosi, intruded and took over and changed the control of this system that we previously set up there. They did it in such a way that until now the system is not self-sufficient. They were always just sucking the system up. And in order to thrive their own countries, they did not modernize the system to make it self-sufficient. They must always live at the expense of someone else. They did it once, twice, and they always need assets for their emitting processes, breaking their rules, printing money without assets so these can develop. They simply cannot do. They always come up with a scam. This is the Fed school, the school of fraud. These are not my words. These are the words of a former Fed employee, a former immigrant from the USSR who remembered and spoke about it. When I was here in USSR, and then I came to the US in the early 90s, I studied at their School of Economics. Everything there is logical and understandable. Everything was clear there. But when I called to work at the Fed and I started going through the Fed training, they told me, Alexander Nikolaevich, he was an Armenian. This is a college of fraud. They really teach fraud here, there, and that's what we deal with today. At that time, the UN was infested with this, but now its structure is shifting sharply to the side of justice. And thank God for that. Our people were not sleeping, and some of our very serious and reliable people have appeared in there. People who have reached a very high level at the UN. And while they used to be at exclusive level, they are now at the legislative level as well. And at the initiative and development level, it is actually the legislative level. And God helps it stays this way. Otherwise, the UN will be discredited and will no longer exist as a center of reconciliation, as some kind of conflict-free regulator between countries. It is about diplomatic regulation. And this doesn't suit some right now. At present, the United Nations doesn't suit Americans either. The Americans would now like to somehow clean up the UN as an organization, as a structure. Because they are not rich in any other initiatives than genocide and disruption. This is their ideology. They are not being taught anything else, and they don't understand how to develop any further. And then comes a creator. And when this creator comes, he says, listen, some structure should be abolished. And they say, no way. But they didn't pay for it. They did not even initiate its establishment, and the USSR is the largest representative of the United Nations based on its votes. If you remember, the USSR had a separate vote, and then each of its republics had a separate vote. So our nation had an overwhelming majority in the United Nations compared to the other states in the United Nations. So how is this possible that such an institution founded by our parents on the basis of victory in such a great war that could be handed over even more? So now it is beginning to function for the benefit of our nation, our state, and they are cutting off its accounts. By no means. That's why they want to shut it down. No way they will. Alexander Nikolaevich, last question. Based on what you have said about the financial system, you say that the financial system is fraudulent. By being based on the Fed, on the dollar, those tests of fraudsters, in your opinion, dealing with economic finance, seriously dealing with finance, what do you think? How should the financial system look like?
Финансовая система
Any financial system should be fair. System is a good word. And any system that is created by the light creators, because of the path of the creator, is the path of the man. And that is actually the path of the creator. And when the system is created, it must be created correctly. It will work then. To understand what the financial system is, let's look at it and talk about it in stages. What exactly is money? In my opinion, parasites in general, the world parasites who are present on our earth, in our society, in our world, they put their 3 screws in there, absolutely illegally, not only against the con, but illegally inserted 3 screws in there, based on 3 strong energies. Because life is energy, and everything around us, objects and also things and images, is all energy that needs to be understood. This put these 3 basic screws on knowledge with the help of distorting the meaning of the world conception and its basic principles. They put the 2nd screw on the earth, that is Mother, Mother of God, who gives birth to children. People are still being promised a return back to earth. To Christians, factories for workers. And they put the 3rd screw on the energy of movement, the energy of communication. The energy of communication is human energy. Sacredly, it is called men eto, God, the God-man. If we take our ancient Vedic mythology and our Vedic knowledge, then God-man is a man, God of a man, and the fleece of a God of man in such a tripod in which a man is standing with his hand raised to the light, to the sun, to the heaven, and hence the word maneta, coin, and hence the word money. That's where it comes from. Does that mean communication? Money, that means energy, energy transfer, energy of human, such an energy that means represents gratitude or some kind of equivalent for a certain activity. And the dengi, money, carry energy. Denga is a chord name in Russian. Den, day in English. We know what it means in Russian. And Ga is a movement. Everything that begins with Ga, Gagarin. He was the first to fly out into space. Ga, Ga, Ra, etc. And that's why Denga is a daily movement. It is the energy of communication that is needed for us to ask someone for something, to thank them, and to be able to pay them for something. It means it is a tool. And who does this energy belong to? I think it is said in the word itself, man, that's a man, isn't it? That energy belongs to man. And so when we say they were doing, because the word do and create are 2 different words, the creator gives birth. The creator is everything created is born. Man gives birth to a painting. He creates a unique statue with his own hands, the only specimen, original. To do something means something else. He took, photographed, scanned, put something in there and made a printing form. In Russian there is a word zdanie, building, and sazdanie, creation. So a photocopy of zdanie, building, is something else. This is a completely different process which does not involve the whole meaning of creation. It is already an automatic or semi-automatic mode by which they are doing so. And in order to create the right system, that is, to give birth to a living system, when we talk about the money, they must also be tied to man. So those fools who are taking these digits and numbers, monetary numbers, and adding them to their accounts, they are only creating destruction in this world. Because they have a corrupted consciousness. They do not understand the light process of development and flourishing of humanity, evolution, love for the nation, for the family, for the homeland, for nature, etc. They lack these things. They have a completely different principles. They made their own system of values, false, crooked values, and on the basis of these values, they set and dropped the population of the earth in different states, in different ways. They tied people with no access to money because without money nothing can be done in our country. Nothing can move without the money today. They tied them to this necessity. They tied everything to money. Previously it was a religious governance, and when it came to an end, then they created a political governance. And now that the political governance ended, they decided to put it all on money. Money, these are accounts, number, artificial intelligence. It is a satanic system by which they control and manipulate people, to drive people away and make them completely homeless. Objects of the electronic virtual world they are creating. And to turn a living person into a biomachine is not their goal. He openly told me, as well as to many comrades they had initiated into their circles, but who did not give in and talked about it. So they constantly persecuted them and killed many of them. The same Morgan, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, as I say, these all are world terrorists, fools who only do evil on earth. They don't know how to do anything else. It is based on their corrupted consciousness, completely corrupted, and it carries the energy of destruction with it. And the system that should be in peace, it should be governed by man himself. That is, imagine that we took some collateral, some cover. We have determined that we, the Soviet nation, have a very serious sum of balance sheet and non-balance sheet assets in the system, in the international financial system, including M0 assets, gold.
В системе, в мировой финансовой системе очень серьезное число, там цифры, да, балансовых и забалансовых активов. Причем прямых активов М0, там золото.
Bank balance sheet gold and non-balance sheet gold. When we sum it up, we get to some colossal numbers. This colossal number, it is a certain human energy that acts as a collateral for payment issuance processes. Collateral, it means coverage, correct? Collateral, yes, coverage for payment issuance processes and securities for the economy and for the construction of organized existence. For existence, the citizens of our country. We took that colossal number and deducted a part from it, for example 10, 20, 30%, and it went aside and conditional collateral to cover emitting processes for all state tasks, that is, for the apparatus, light administrative officials, the army, etc. It's special collateral. It is a national, but diverted here.
То есть это какой-то аппарат только светлых, правильных слуг народа, чиновников, да? Это какая-то армия там и так далее, и так далее. Вот он у нас спец.
We then take everything else and share it with the citizens of the Soviet Union. A very interesting number is emerging. For every person, very serious amount, and based on this, let's call it, for example, the Soviet golden ruble.
И исходя из этого, мы, ну, к примеру, называем это советский золотой рубль. Почему золотой? Потому что советский.
Why Soviet? Because the Soviet ruble was always tied to one drum of gold, and we also take it like that now. As these assets are located in our country, regardless of the premises in which they are stored, according to the law and according to whom the right belongs to, then they also controls this right. And by law, these assets are on the balance sheet of the body that possesses these rights, and in the Ghost Bank of the USSR, in the account of the USSR Ghost Bank, already emitted into various securities, all sorts of them. And these assets actually represent an emittance cushion. We will divide them for each person. We will give each person two types of capital so that the economy works properly and so that there is no folly caused by this surplus. As they say, inflation, which does not exist, will determine the ancestral capital for man. This is an asset that is not subject to depreciation, not subject to any advances or sales. It is the net ancestral capital of every person born in our country. And part of these funds, so we can start the economy, it is so-called compensatory capital, which is very serious and sufficient for the citizen to, for example, build a house, buy some land, etc. And so they have enough in the beginning. I'm not saying we are going to do it now. It's just the model of the future, as you are asking me for what the system should look like. That's why I'm trying to explain something about the system of tomorrow. In states there are ministries. That's how they are very composed. We are used to see such a state establishment. I place the word ministry with the word sphere. The word ministry, and also to work according to this word, as it said, the word ministry, and also to work according to this word, as it is said in our biblical text. In the beginning there was the word, also Veda, the knowledge was the word since the beginning of the time, and the word was God, and God was the Word, and the God Creator went on creating. The Word is very important, still according to the ancient scriptures, I mean ancient. Therefore the Word must be accurate, literate and polite. That is how we should treat the words. So in my opinion, the word sphere means a certain status from the higher spheres. It also carries a meaning status for the issue of direction and organization of the structure of being existence, such as the sphere of health, that is the healthcare, right? The sphere of the environment, etc. I would turn ministry into sphere. In spheres there always had to be a council, just like here in the Soviet Union. You remember there was a Raikom, district commissioner, Raisovet, district council, and now the administration, etc. You go there, and you really are getting to hell in Russian. You will come to the administration, to your servants, and they will even crucify you with their evil looks. And they'll also treat each other like that, like a cattle. And so in these spheres there is a council. What is this council? It is according to the council, according to the conscience. So there is a sphere council and there is a head, chairman of the sphere council, right? Now they are called ministers. May he be the head, chairman of the sphere council, as it is now in many philosophies. I will not say in religions, in many philosophies, in Asian, in Sufi, in various movements, they all agree on one thing. It is necessary to create such a scheme of being, such a system. And parasites also agree with this, which would be self-organizing, self-sufficient, self-developing, self-governing and self-regulated. It's a parasite's dream, but they never know how to make a key to it, how to make outgrowth engine, how to be able to live longer than average. They always acted and searched only for themselves, both in terms of knowledge and access, and also in terms of the keys to the knowledge. Therefore, based on these positions, and we know the situation as I think it is right, the right technical role of the system, we will now try to build the system with you. Take a look. The sphere is created. There are central spheres. Figuratively speaking, these are the ministries. There are some republicans, some regional spheres. One sphere is located in one part. One nation lives there. They have their own traditions, values that are given to the nation. Another nation has different values, and it's nature that they have some interests that are important to them. For example, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin has paid attention to tigers for a long time, right? Do you remember that?
Естественно, у них есть какие-то интересы, которые для них важны. И, допустим, Владимир Владимирович Путин очень долго, значит, популярность отдавал именно сохранению тигров, да?
The Siberian tigers, yes, the Amur tigers. So why not to create a tiger protection sphere in this zone, in this territory, for example? So the spheres must be created by the nation itself. This is based on these principles, by using the current language, let's call it self-government. And by creating these spheres, the ancestral capital suddenly starts to work.
Как раз начинает работать родовой капитал. Каким образом?
Let's take a look at some territory, some city. In this city and in its surroundings, there are some common spheres. They exist in such an open, accessible electronic format on the web, and people are given an ancestral capital to manage it. For example, let's say each person received 3 billion gold rubles, a huge capital, and he sees that there is a very low level of environment in his territory. And there is also a low level of healthcare. He acts based on what he deems appropriate, as he sees his world around him. And so he manages his capital accordingly. They redistribute their ancestral capital on a quarterly basis. They use it in one way or another. For example, if the levels of the environment in the region is really low, people will put 2 billion into the sphere of the economy. They will direct their assets, their ancestral capital in there, and they will give another billion to the health sphere. So the problem will be seen on the common leadership computer of this region. What collateral is set aside from the given spheres, and according to that collateral it will be possible to see which problems will need to be solved there, to be able to see realistically what the problems inside the nation really are. The nation will see it for itself. Yes, our nation will determine that. And what does it mean to set a given collateral aside? It is a practical collateral, coverage for targeted emittents for project financing. You understand what I'm talking about, don't you? For example, Vasily, our Russian Vasily, has 3 billion of ancestral capital in one of the regional centers, and he has a mission. He wants to start a big farm, a kolkhoz. He wants to organize it. He knows how to organize it. He has everything thought through. He sits down and writes it all down, his whole business plan. With this business plan project, he will then come to the treasury, for example, to the Rad treasury, to the treasury of the USSR Gosbank, and actually not to the treasury. He will come to the council first. What is the council? The council of 3 spheres. A local council? Yes, we consider number 3, a divine number. And based on 3, such as the spiritual sphere, actually spiritual council, the morality council, and the council of good. Without all those foreign words, the mutants we don't need at all. People will be elected to the spiritual council on the basis of Kopnoy rule, or on the principle of working groups, depending on where it will be, whether in the city or in the village. These have to be good, spiritual people who are able to see and know how to determine the right person and whether to pay or not to pay attention to him, her. These are selected positions within the council, and it's the same in the morality council as well. What is in line with morality, what is pleasing the nation, what is in line with national traditions, what is pleasing to our neighbors. Their task is to set the moral standards of the project that Vasily came up with. And good, that is material. We are confusing this with some thin materials, no? Good. This is a lamp, a table, something in your basement. All of this good. The Russians say, the house is on fire, save the good. Do you remember that? And this is, let's say, a material sphere. When Vasily comes out with his business plan, he first receives approval from the spiritual sphere. His paper then travels to the sphere of morality, from where he must also receive an approval, and then to the sphere of culture. The spiritual sphere takes a look at Vasily's norm. What do they say from a subtle point of view? And they see that Vasily is a normal person. He doesn't get drunk. He doesn't do bad things. The Morality Council determines the moral capacity of the proposal that Vasily submitted. And the material sphere is also assessing the budget and the meaningfulness of this project. Whether the fruits he wants to plant here to actually grow here, whether they are not being flooded, etc. And based on this, Vasily moves on, gets a recommendation with which he then comes to the treasury, where he hands it over, and part of the collateral will be open for him, 5 million or 100 million gold rubles, to organize this project. Kolkhoz, right? And Vasily will not take any money into this wallet from there. Everything will be paid for him. Harvesters, farming equipment, construction of various facilities, and also land will be allocated to him based on the decisions of the sphere. And Vasily will then organize this collective farm, Kolkhoz. And if Vasily organized it correctly, if he started it correctly, and if by the given date he declared he achieves the production, or he declares a minimum production, then Vasily would not have to return anything, and his collateral was completely released. Vasily created direct capitalization from virtual, which already brings material benefit to the population. Do you understand what the point is? It's all his income. All Vasily has is now his own individual property. All Vasily And this individual property allows him to have more money, which people will simply be receiving for managing their ancestral capital. Because the seventh technological order, as many now call Russian, are the technologies that will now be emerging onto the surface and allow people to have more time for their free life. And on the basis of philosophy, they will be able to identify themselves as free creators. Therefore, it is not necessary to push everyone to work at assembly lines, because one can manage their own capital only by observing their surroundings and engaging in improvement of this world, only with the help of their own voice as a censor, with a certain and reasonable environmental worldview. And like this, he can start making money for managing his ancestral capital. In this way, there will be no holes in our market, people will be self-sufficient. And natural processes of granting ancestral properties, allocating spiritual and other material benefits to the most successful people, this will be all according to the customs of our ancestors. A girl would not want to marry some lazy man. She marries Vasily's son, who also stands out, firstly due to his father, his genetics, his diligence, he has already proven, and secondly, he would have been already brought up in this spirit. Spiritually strong and diligent with people will be put together with other spiritually strong and diligent people. Slackers will put together with the other lazy ones. Those lazy ones will be leaving, and those spiritually strong and diligent will carry on developing their lineages. So this is how it will all be built, and their whole philosophies, ancestral properties, etc. Such a system will allow us to see rebuilding harmony of these collaterals, let's say securing the spheres, which will be regulatable this way. If local environmentalists are unable to cope, regional institutes will be involved, and if they are unable to cope, central institutes will be involved, and they will put those programs into the prevent the disharmonious allocation of whichever collateral for realization of the target emittance of project financing to eliminate the problem of where the nation will direct its ancestral capital. Well, you spoke not only about the financial system, but about the country's economic system as a whole. That was just in a nutshell. It's all in ages is simple. You just have to do it right. With the help of today's state of the IT and with the help of today's state of the art computer technology, we virtually have a new internet ready. We have the new means of communication ready, and these generally rule out of hacking as such. As such? Yes, as such. They also rule out espionage. They work on different principles. They do not deprive people and nature of health. There are completely different principles embedded in them. They are not harmful to health at all. And also the security of this service is 1,000 times higher than those here, which are all packed with transistors, receivers that can burn at any electromagnetic frequency, and the entire system on Earth would collapse. In 3 seconds, the sun just went on a small ramping. Forget about the electronic system. New, completely different signals came out on the satellites. Forget about banknotes, because all the chips that were inserted into them would burn. This is a small dimple in them. Humanity would be left without means of payment. The whole parasitic system of today the whole corporate system that lacks spirituality and morality, and without such a human development, it wouldn't just be terrible for our future generation, but impossible. It would all lead to destruction of the world. And based on that, it is necessary to move to reason, razum. It is necessary to think with razum, to use common sense. We need to understand who we are, where we are from, what our ancestors founded in us, why should value their experience. Today, all those who deal with excavations, those who search and study the past, they have already clearly shown to his entire crooked Illuminati scientific community that the technology and the level of culture of our ancestors is much higher than at the present. And it can be seen all over the place, all around us. You just have to be open. You just have to open your eyes and see it. It is necessary to take off the pink glasses, these Kabbalas, which they hung up on and brought to us in a sleeping and foggy state. That's what I would say. I understand. Well, it was interesting about the financial system. That would be for a separate, fairly long conversation. Big thanks.